So now that we have our player moving around, there's one other little thing we want to fix up, which is that at the moment we can make our player just fly off the screen, which obviously is no good. So we want to make sure that our player can not go off the screen on the left and the right, or at the top and the bottom. Now in our previous game, where we've been controlling paddles, we haven't wanted them to go off the screen either, so we set up a very simple way of checking if our ship goes above a certain value, make sure that it gets set back to being exactly that value. And we could do the exact same thing with our ship here and just check if it goes above this point, then set it back to here, or if it goes below this point, set it to here, or if it goes left of this point, set it back to here, or if it goes right of this point, set it back to here. But then we're ending up with 4 different if statements there, when what we can use is a different technique that's built into Unity that we can take advantage of and make it much simpler for us to be able to control. So to do this, we're going to need 2 different points in space. So we're going to have somewhere that it can go most to the left here and most to the top value. And then over here we're going to have another point in space where it can go most to the right and most to the bottom. So let's create those 2 objects first of all. So we're going to create a new empty, and we're going to say top left for this one, and I'll move it in position in a second. And then we're going to create another one and call this one bottom right. And we want to make sure that our ship can actually go to these positions. So the first thing I'm going to do is make both of these a child of the player, and then set both of their position to be 0, 0, so that they're exactly on top of the player ship. And I'm going to move our player ship up to the left corner of the screen, so up here. So this is as far up as we want our player to go here, and as far to the left as we want him to go as well. And if we go to our game view, we can see that's as far up as we would want our ship to be able to move to. So that's fine. So that's where we want our top left to be. And now, because our top left is a child of the player and we move the player, our top left is exactly where the player should be. So let's make it no longer a child of the player. And now there's no longer a child, it'll stay right there. But if we move the player out of the way, like down here, our top left will still remain there, so we know that we can say, okay, that's exactly as much as we want the player to go to. So let's do the same now for the bottom right. We'll move our player down to the bottom right here. And we probably don't really want our player to go too far right on the screen. So we can actually pull it back a little bit to allow space for any enemies to kind of appear here and not just completely destroy the player as soon as they encounter them. So now that we have our bottom right position, I'm going to drag that out, and it's no longer a child of the player at all. And we go back to our player. So now let's set these up on the player controller script so that they're actually going to do something. So we'll go back into our player controller script and we'll create a reference to both of these objects. And we'll say, we'll create a public transform, and this one we'll call top left. And we'll create another public transform that we'll call bottom right. And now the thing that we're going to use for controlling our player's movement is a thing called a clamp. And a clamp basically says, I'm going to make sure that whatever value you put into me will stay between 2 other given values. So the way we can use this is to say, okay, the position of our player ship, so the transform dot position, we want to set that to be a new vector tree, because remember, transforms on every object have an x, y and a z value. Even though we're using 2D for everything here, we still have to account for the z value of every object in Unity. So on the x-axis, what we want to say is matf dot clamp, and this is our clamp function that will allow us to control the position of the object within the world. So within this clamp, we have a float value, a float min, and a float max. So the value is whatever we want to pass in. So for example, that's going to be our current position of our ship, wherever that is on the x-axis. Then we want to say a minimum value on the x-axis that it can possibly go to, which will be the x part of our top left. And then we want to set the maximum value, which will be the x part of our bottom right. So here we can just say, okay, the first value is where we currently are. So that's our transform dot position dot x. then the next part is what's the minimum value. So that's on our top left object. We know that's as far left as we can go. So we can say, okay, on the top left, on the x-axis, that's as much as we want to go there. And then the maximum value is going to be, okay, on the bottom right, that's as far as we can go to the right. So that'll be our x-axis there. So that's our bottom right dot x. So that's perfect. We've got our clamp set up on our x-axis. So we'll do the same on our y-axis now. We'll say matf dot clamp. And here we'll say, okay, the value we want to use here is wherever we currently are on the y-axis. So transform.position.y. The maximum we want, or sorry, no, the minimum we want to go to is wherever is our y value on the bottom right object. So we'll say, okay, bottom right dot y. And then finally, the maximum we want to go to is on our top left object, wherever the y is on that. So we'll say top left dot y, and we'll close that bracket and hit a comma, and then we need to decide where we go on the z-axis. And as usual, we don't want to change what's happening with the z-axis at all, so we'll just say transform dot position dot z, like that. So perfect. Now we're constraining the movement of our objects within the world. Oh, I actually just realized these should be not just top left dot x, they should be top left dot position dot x, because of course it's a transform object, so it has a position, a rotation, and a scale. So they should be top left dot position dot x, bottom right dot position dot x, and the same for our y's, bottom right dot position dot y, and top left dot position dot y. Okay, perfect. We'll save this, go back into our game, and what we should have now is our player being restricted to moving within this given area on the screen. Of course, we need to actually set up these references to work properly with our player. So once it's compiled, we'll scroll down, we'll move top left into the top left slot and bottom right into the bottom right slot. We'll hit play here, and now we can move our ship only over to the right here. We can't go off the screen at the top. We can not go off the screen on the right, or on the left even, and we can't go off at the bottom. We're free to move around in this area completely, but then if our players try to go off the screen, they won't be able to, and we're able to stay within our playable area. So perfect. That's exactly how we want it to work.